Zoom check. Mike, can you hear me?
Yep, hear you fine.
Thank you.
I have 2 minutes. One minute. President Gardner, I show 9:30.
Thank you. We will then call to order the regular board meeting of the Western Municipal Water District. Tammy, would you please do a roll call?
Thank you. Good morning. Director Torres.
Here.
Director Dinstedt.
Good morning, I'm present.
Director Roten.
Here. Good morning.
Director Isby.
Good morning, I'm here.
Thank you. President Gardner.
I am here.
Thank you. Good morning, President Gardner. You do have a quorum today.
Great, thank you very much. We'll move then to the Pledge of Allegiance. We're going to be led by Philip Muthart. And Philip, your choice, before or after the pledge, will you tell us just a little bit about you and how long you've been here and what you do? And
Sure, my pleasure. I'll start with that. My name's Philip Muthart. I've been with the district 3 years. I'm an Ops Tech 2, and I work in the distribution department.
great, thank you.
Fantastic. So if you'll join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip.
Okay, that brings us then to public comments. Tammy, did we receive any written public comments?
We have received no written comments, and I've received no requests to speak for this morning.
Okay, is there anyone in the audience who would like to address the commission? Seeing none, we'll move right along. Our first presentation is the Aqua Joint Powers Insurance Authority. Craig, would you
Yeah,
like to do the introduction?
I'll invite the team up. Andy, I assume Andy Sells will lead it off, but please introduce your team. We're excited to have you here. I know Director Roten will be representing Western Epit Aqua for the meeting up there, so this is really good timing to have you in front of us, so thank you for coming down.
Well, thank you. And are you joining us for dinner Monday night? Very good, very good. There's a nice celebration there I'm looking forward to. Okay, yes, very good, very good. Well, I'm Andy Sells. I'm the executive officer here at the JPIA, and I brought a whole team with me here. Randy, many of you all probably know Randy. They're from Cucamonga Valley. He is on our executive committee, and so it's nice to get him involved in these things and getting out meeting districts. I have Adrian Beatty with me as well. Adrian is the assistant executive officer for another 5 months and 11 days, at which point I retire, and the executive committee has appointed her as the next executive officer here at the JPIA.
Congratulations.
So I'll let her give you a little bit of her background, and then, Kevin's trying to hide from us here. This is day 3 for Kevin at the JPIA. He is our new Director of Member Outreach. Kevin comes from us, last job was at the Town of Paradise as the town manager. Before that, he's the general manager at Paradise Irrigation District and dealt with that issue when the fire went through there. So that was Kevin. He was actually on our finance committee, chairman of our finance for a while, so another bean counter moving on in life. I can relate to that comment. So I'll just give you, that's kind of the background here. You can move us. I will let Adrian talk a little bit. Tell him a little bit about yourself, and you'll start us off.
Thank you for having us here today. As Andy said, I'm the Assistant Executive Officer. I have been in the risk pooling industry for about 18 years. I've worked with about 7 different risk pools in California and in the state of Washington. I've worked with cities, cities, housing authorities, school districts, and now water districts. So I'm very excited to be with the JPIA. The JPIA is very well known in the California Joint Powers Insurance Authority or risk pooling industry because it is a very well-run organization, and a lot of people that work for risk pools, there are a lot that are run by contract, and that's sort of the holy grail is to get to one that is a standalone public entity, and you can really have a good control over the fate of the organization. So I'm very happy to be here. Our first slide, what is the JPIA? So as you know, as a member, we have 401 members at this point in time. We started with about 83 members, and we've grown from there. And really, it's a partnership. It's a partnership between the staff and the members to make sure that we're protecting the risks of the district as best we can. Next slide, please. So we only allow public water districts. That's one of the things that's unique about our pool is there are a lot of pools that have different types of entities intermixed in their membership. So all of our members have to have their own independently elected board of directors. As I mentioned, we have 83 members. We started with 83 members, and we have retained 79 of those. So we do have very long-term relationships with our members. It's not, despite having 401 members now, it's not the easiest thing to become a member of the JPIA at this point. We have a lot of districts that have very good loss histories, Western being among the best. And Andy will talk a little bit more about how great of a loss history you have and the excellent work that the staff here does to control your risks. So in order to protect Western and all of the other districts that are doing really great work, we don't just let any district join, because if their loss history is worse than the average of the group, then everybody's going to pay more, the losses are going to increase, and it will be actually harder to purchase excess and reinsurance. So we do look very carefully at our underwriting of new members. Next slide, please. These are our 4 main pooled programs where the members pool risk in the programs. Andy's going to get into this a little bit later. Next slide, please. And actually, I'll toss this to you.
Thank you. Once again, so it's so great to see everyone, especially when they're friends. And as you see here, you see the big checks. And Laura, we would usually show up with a big check saying, here's your reimbursement for a job well done from all the different insurance pools you might belong to. Well, this year's a little different. And Andy's going to talk about that, how when we talk about retrospective premiums, we've done adjustments in the past years, and then we find out, how much money because of the great safety or your liability or property. And this year's going to be a little different because of some of the losses, we decided to keep the money and reinvest it. So Andy's going to speak to that. But it's not a bad thing. It's just, why give money back and then have it taken back because of he's going to talk about because of higher premiums. So what we're doing to rate stabilize. So that's here. And as you know, other insurance agencies, when they look at this, they're looking for profits. And of course, we have no profits. The profits we get are the ones that we return to our members. So that's how that works. And the next slide, please. So here's our government. And of course, we're of the members, and each member sends a representative that sits on our board of directors. And that board of directors represents the members of what they want their insurance agency to look like. And it's not an agency, they're a pool. We are members who share each other's loss and the risk. And of course, we want the pool to be as good as it can be. And we also want an understanding of what the members want. So we have each agency provides a director, and then that director picks an executive board, which I'm one of the members on. It's a board of 9. And then as you see here, we have the different committees, because we want the committees are run by the different members. And they're on the board telling us what's important to them and what type of insurance they would like to see. So as you see, it's very driven by membership, and the staff responds to that. So thank you again. And
Good job. Can you flip me to the next one here? Go ahead and go to the next one here. So as Adrian mentioned, there's 4 pooled programs. Western participates in all 4 of these pooled programs. I'll talk a little bit about the liability program. That's for what we call third-party claims. Maybe a pipe breaks and it floods a business or a home or something, and they sue you. That's where that coverage comes in. We'll look at the property program as well. That's more for your assets, your buildings, your vehicles, kind of like our homeowners insurance. Workers' comp, of course, covers workers' comp, and then the health benefit side, you guys participate on the health benefit side as well. The liability program, basically what happens is the members share in the first $5 million of every loss. It's divvied up amongst the members based on size. And then we go out to the market and buy what we call excess or reinsurance for another $50 million. So there's a total of $55 million in coverage. So every district has, on a per occurrence basis, $55 million of coverage in that event. And I've been at the JPIA a long time. We've had 3 claims get over $10 million. Only one got over 20. So it's very rare that we have a very large loss. As Adrian pointed out earlier, kind of a difference between us and other public entities is We don't have any police. We don't have any fire. I use the joke, you know, dangerous condition of public property. You probably don't have people picnicking at your treatment plant. So we just have less exposures, to be honest with you. And that's how we're able to really fine tune the coverages there. School districts, as you can imagine, the sexual assault molestation claims, those are multi-million-dollar claims. Not a large exposure. Ours is generally property damage, a pipe break, a levee breach, maybe an automobile accident. So the big thing here is really the stability of that program. If you take me to the next slide, you can see that that program sent, you know, and we're still below the rate we were in 2000, you know, 10 years ago in 13, 14. We did raise rates 10% this year, as you can imagine, with just the cost of inflation. I would tell you the reason, you know, it probably would have happened sooner, but many of you remember, I think I came down and did a presentation about creating our captive. We created our own insurance company. It's domiciled in Utah. That allows us to put our investments there, which allows us to match our investments then with kind of our payout pattern. In government code, generally, you have an average 3-year maturity, so you've got to roll your portfolio over. It'll take me sometimes 10, 12 years to close a work comp claim or a very expensive liability. So in essence, I'd have to turn all the investments over 3 times before we got to an end of a policy year. By having more flexibility, it allowed us to go out, longer and match those type of things. It also allowed us to do a little bit of, we can do equities and things that we currently can't do with the California government code. So that gave us a higher rate of interest, and I think that saved off some of those earlier, kept us from raising rates sooner because we had the additional interest income there. The captive, something, or you'll hear more about. It's relatively new for us. I think we're 3 years into it now, so it's a new venture for us. Next slide, please. The property program, next slide. Here's a different situation here. Property's been our challenge for the last couple of years, our golden child for 25 years, the last few years, and quite frankly, it's the wildfires. And that's what Randall was talking about earlier is, generally when we bring the refund checks, it's because those years, many of those years, had excess revenues. But we've had some fairly significant claims. Kevin's responsible for one of those there at Paradise. We're going to hold him for that one. Yeah. That's why it got so expensive, is Kevin there. And then of course the El Dorado fire last year, we had some wooden flumes that caught fire there. We did have a couple of very large liability claims as well. We had a couple of boys up in Northern California on a spring break that made contact with an electrified little bridge, and they both died as a result of that. So those are expensive claims, and that's what's then led to the situation where rather than having those excess dollars, they're now being applied to claims. And Adrienne will talk a little bit more about it. That's the way the process is supposed to work, but she'll give you a little better idea how it works. The thing about property is it got real tough. We were at Lloyd's of London and are still currently there, but we're making a move. It became too expensive. They didn't cancel our rates. It's just, if you're willing to pay me $3 million and not pay any claims, you can still stay with us. And we decided, no, we're not doing that. So we do, as you can see on that third bullet down, we do have a very large deductible there, $10 million. Hopefully that's a one-time thing. We're changing that market around now. But as you can see, and kind of like in property, that little chart there shows you that no one, and in this case we have $500 million in coverage, no one insurance company wants to take all that risk. So that's what that chart on the right, the bar chart is showing, how many different players you have to have, and they all take a small proportionate share of that risk. And that by itself becomes complicated, trying to get that many people to play friendly in the sandbox. Next slide. And this one here is, you could see that sharp trend that happened right after the fires there. And it's been that way. I think it will now start to level off for a while now. We've taken on, as I said, much more risk, and currently, knock on wood, that's going well for us. But that one's been our challenging program. Next slide, please. The workers' compensation, once again, next slide, is a self-funded program. There we have a $2 million retention, so all the members share in all losses up to $2 million, and then we buy excess insurance that goes to statutory limits, which whatever the state says the value of that claim is, that's what's covered there. There's about 204 members in that program. Most everybody, like you, participates in all programs. We probably have, especially with the GSAs, we probably have 50 districts that are what I would call paper districts. They don't have any employees, they don't have any assets, so they won't participate in the property program and/or workers' comp. You know, some of them up in the Central Valley State Water Contractors, they contract, they sign off on water moving through the federal system there. That program has been performing very well for us for a long time here. Next slide. You can see that we've been on a downward decline on those rates there. I would tell you really what's driving the stability in our programs of these rates is you, the members. And we'll talk a little bit about what Western does specifically for you guys as well. In the liability program, I think Randall mentioned it, we have what we call an EMOD program. So your losses are compared to average. And if your losses are better than average, you get a discount. And if your losses are higher than average, then your multiplication factor is greater than 1.1, 1.2. I mean, some that have a lot of losses could have their premiums doubled. You guys, on the other hand, on the liability side, hats off to staff, 0.5. So in essence, your premium is half of what would be normally collected there. So that's a testament to the things that staff does. Adrian will talk a little bit more about those things. Workers' comp, same situation. I think right now you guys are like 0.85. So you get a 15% discount up front because of the loss history and what the efforts that staff does to control their risk. So that's a hats off to you. I mean, that 0.5 is one of the lowest I have. I think maybe the lowest that we have in our pool right now. So on the flip side, between staff and others in the audience here, there is a real focused effort, and we'll give you some of those stats there. Next slide. Employee benefits, next slide. Once again, a self-insured program. You know, employee benefits is just different. It's just, they don't, you know, in liability, I follow that pipe break. I follow that automobile accident from start to finish. In employee benefits, it's how many dollars are spent on that Social Security number in the last 12 months. They don't track whether it's, you know, diabetes or cancer or anything like that. It's just dollars spent, kind of an unusual situation there. We did reduce rates 10% last year, and for those of you that make budgets, be aware that, as Randall mentioned, in the liability property work comp program, we can write you a check when it's over here. Employee benefits is a little bit different task because many of our members have a share. The employee, maybe they pay 100% for the employee and 80% of the dependent, or maybe it's an 80-20 split all the time. There's all different formulas out there. In the event that we would write a check to a district that had the employees pay a portion of their benefits, they technically would then owe the employees part of those dollars as well. Any past employees may be involved in that. So I look at the finance person trying to figure out what those spreads are would be a difficult task. So what we did, we deliberately reduced the rates 10% last year. The reason why is we had a lot of excess funds as a result of COVID, right? When COVID hit, nobody's doing those non-emergency procedures. We're not doing hips or knees or back surgeries. Those costs just dropped dramatically. So we were in a very overfunded position. So the way we tried to get the money back to the members is deliberately lower the rates to a point that the money collected will be less than the costs incurred, and that's certainly bearing out. So my point to staff is expect about a 10% increase for the 24 year starting in January, because it was a one-time thing trying to get those dollars back into the member agencies there. We've certainly added to these programs. Progeny is a family health program that we have out there. Hinge Health is an online physical therapy. So we are trying to use some of those dollars that we made to enhance the programs going forward for our members and their agencies. Next slide. That program, and you can see that drop off there, that is planned. We will, for this current year, the revenues collected will be less than the costs incurred. And what everybody in the industry is trying to figure out, these costs went up very high. Are we seeing back surgeries that would have happened this year plus the back surgery that would have happened last year? So I'm seeing 2 this year instead, 1 of each year. So they are high. Nobody knows. I mean, everybody's kind of like drivers. Everybody has a seat. They all have an opinion, but statistics will bear themselves out here. That was a nice way of saying that, right? Everybody has a seat. And then next slide. So I'm going to let Adrian talk a little bit about the whole refund process, and this will help. And you getting a sneak preview, you'll see this again here in 2 weeks at the board meeting.
So the main purpose of us coming here today is, as Randall said, we normally are coming with the big Ed McMahon check, and we are not this year. But it is a good thing.
Isn't that worth it?
It's a good thing that we're not coming with the check.
Okay, wait a
and I'll
second.
I'll
Wait a
explain
second.
why.
There's no check?
There's no check.
I was waiting for this
Sorry.
buildup.
I know.
This is the whole reason that I get so excited when I see him. Every time he shows up, you're supposed to show up with the check.
That's right.
Well, you have in the last 5 years gotten over $300,000 back from the JPIA. So there is that.
You did notice I pushed her to this, right?
Yeah, let me talk about it.
It wasn't that subtle.
Right under. So how our process works is, and Andy kind of touched on this a little bit. We estimate every year for each of the programs how much premium we need to collect to cover the claims that will ever hit that program. So for example, liability, you could have, it's per occurrence, right? So you could have a liability claim reported 7 years from now that applies to this program year. So we are collecting all the money that we think we will need to ever pay for any of the claims that are going to apply to this year in all of the programs. More often than not with the JPIA, because we don't have the kinds of exposures that are really driving up claims costs right now, like police, civil rights violations, and fire departments are very expensive from a work comp perspective. School districts are very expensive from a work comp perspective. We don't have those exposures. So more often than not, 8 or 9 years out of 10, we are able to come back and give refunds because what we've collected, because we also fund conservatively, exceeds the costs that are ultimately incurred in that year. So we collect the premiums up front. 5 years later, we then look back to assess what claims have come in compared to the monies collected. That, the difference between whether or not, and this is every program year. So if you saw our big crazy spreadsheet, there's, 7 years of liability, 20 years of work comp, 3 or 4 years of property. Each year we're looking to see, are we in the red or the black? And then that's all filtering into a rate stabilization fund that often generates refunds. Next slide, please. So sort of visually how this normally works is we do this retrospective premium adjustment process starting at the 5th year and then every year until that year is closed. All of the claims have been reported. There's no estimated, what we call incurred but not reported claims, so claims we don't know about yet that haven't been reported, and everything's been paid and is closed out. Sorry, there's a waterfall thing happening. So more often than not, we have positive equity. The first thing that we do to protect members, the last thing we want to ever do is come back and ask you to write an additional check for additional premiums to pay us for a prior program year. So for the liability program, we have a catastrophic loss fund. That's to handle really severe events, multiple large claims, or a single large claim we didn't anticipate, or years that may be underfunded. We have an actuary identify how much money we should keep in this fund so that if we were to have some big crazy catastrophic loss, we would have the money to apply versus asking the members to cut another check. So the first thing we do if we have positive equity, we look to each member's balance in the liability cat fund to see if that's full. And if it's full, then we move on to the next fund, which is essentially set up the same way but for workers' compensation. If that fund is full, then we move on to the next fund, which is the rate stabilization fund. You can equate this to basically a savings account. So money goes in and money goes out. In each of these funds, every program year, every member has their own allocation. And so we identify how much Western needs to have in the liability cat fund, in the work comp cat fund, in their rate stabilization fund. If all of those buckets are full, then the next thing that happens is you get a refund check. Next slide, please. What happened this year is when we did the retrospective premium adjustment, we didn't have positive equity. We had quite a few years that were underwater, and Andy talked about we had 2 major wildfire losses. We had a couple really large liability losses. So money needs to go back into the system versus coming back to the members. So we identified that there wasn't any money to go into the liability cat fund, so you see the little arrow there no longer has water running through it. There's no money to go into the work comp cat fund. Next, click. And there's no money to go into the rate stabilization fund. And in fact, one more click. We now need to take money out of the rate stabilization fund to make those years that are underwater whole as part of this adjustment. So the good news is this is the way the process is supposed to work. This is how we've designed it, and this is why we have those CAT funds and those rate stabilization funds, so that inevitably when you have a year that is underfunded, and statistically for us, it's been 1 of 10, 2 of 10, we can use the money from these funds, and in fact, we used money both from the rate stabilization fund and the liability CAT fund this year, a small amount from the liability CAT fund, to make the years where we have not collected enough money compared to the losses whole. Next click, please. So, no refund to members. We did have a very small refund. Historically, in years past, the last 4 or 5 years, the aggregate refund has been about $3 to $4 million. This year it was about $250,000. So a very small percentage of members got a modest refund check. But the good news is nobody received an invoice for additional monies to make those older years whole. Next slide, please. So a little bit about the district itself. Andy touched on this and the really remarkable risk management work that the staff here do to manage your risk. You have among the lowest experience modification factors in our liability program and among the lowest in our workers' compensation program. So your employees are kept safe, they're not getting injured, they're also not causing issues that cause a third party to sue you. So you're keeping your infrastructure up to date, your drivers are safe and driving safely. We have several things that we do on the risk management side to try to help our members manage the risk, and you do a very good job of fully utilizing those resources. So we have an online training platform called Vector Solutions. Your employees in just the past year alone have completed just shy of 1,000 courses. That's really, really remarkable. There's a lot of focus here, clearly, on making sure employees are well-trained and managing their risk. We have a professional development program. There's different tracks that you can take. There's human resources, operations, and a supervisory track. You have 8 employees, and you have to take a whole series of classes within a certain amount of time, and then if you successfully complete it, then you get a nice plaque from us and a nice letter from Andy, and it's a big deal. You have 8 employees currently enrolled in the PDP program, and you've had 4 that have completed that program, so that's really fantastic. We also have a leadership program that I'd encourage you to consider putting some of your folks through. It's intended for general managers or assistant general managers or any sort of up-and-coming stars in your organization that may have a leadership role in the future. It's a 1-year program, and we do it regionally, both in Southern California and Northern California. It's a very popular program. It's a small group. There's only about 16 employees that we have go through each cohort, Northern and Southern California. Each year there's an application process, but we can certainly tell you more about that if you're interested and have some employees you think would benefit from that. You also received a risk management award in fall of 2022. What that means is you had an employee that submitted a suggestion for how safety could be, how they've improved safety here that might benefit other districts. And our risk advisors all get together and choose who are the winners of we give those awards twice a year. And one of your employees was selected, and they get a monetary award for that, somewhere around $100, $500, and we use those what the employees submit, we share those with the rest of the membership so that when districts like Western are really doing great things to manage the risk, we can share that with all the other districts and they can learn some easy ways to manage their risk and improve their risk management programs as well. Next slide. I think that's what we have for you. So again, thank you for having us and we'll entertain any questions that you have.
Great. Thank you very much. We really appreciate you coming. We wish there was a check.
No, but Brenda, Andy told me we did put a smiley face next to Western's line item, so that's.
One of our employees got a check.
That's right.
True, one of your employees.
We're doing okay.
The last conference.
Okay.
Does anyone have questions?
Just a quick one. There was an acronym used, GSAs. What is that?
Well, so it's part of the Groundwater Sustainability Act that
Oh,
went
okay.
in 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Not very many of these GSAs have gotten permission from the state yet. That's still a battle, but that's what we refer to them as. GSAs are groundwater sustainability agencies, part of the GSA, the Groundwater Sustainability Act. And we have probably, like I said, about 25, 30 of them in there. It's just a minimum amount of insurance. It's there to protect the board. They don't have any assets yet. They don't have any employees, so it's a minimum premium that we collect from them.
Okay. And I was trying to formulate a question as you were talking, and I was here last year when you did bring the big check, and it was pretty exciting. But totally understand, each year you carefully analyze and what's best for the JPIA and the members. To me, when the big check comes, it's such a visual proof of how Western has performed or reached higher heights and that kind of thing. So is there some way to know that this year without seeing a check? Like areas where we've been really strong or, and maybe I'm asking a question that can't be answered because I know it is a pool.
Right.
And so I understand that. But
Yeah, so mind you, not, in a year where we give refund checks, not everybody gets a refund, right? So you are right about that. And when Adrian talked about the rate stabilization fund, it is so we basically maintain 400 little bank accounts for each member agency. So certainly you can, and there was, I think recently the RSF statements went out where you could see your balance. I think for this year, really, your takeaways, that low EMOD, I can't, the fact that you get a 50% discount on the liability program, I don't have very many districts that get that. And you actually have to be a fairly large district from our perspective. You guys are one of our larger members. We have maybe 25 districts that have more than 100 employees. Most of our members are the smaller ones, so they can't even get down that low. So I think your takeaway is that EMOD. Same thing in workers' comp. Having getting a 15% discount up front, those are really the takeaways for you. I could show you your rate stabilization balance, but I don't think it won't have the same context or the pizzazz as the Ed McMahon size check.
yeah.
But, just FYI, the good thing is Western doesn't show up on my radar very often, if really at all. I know we had the one issue, Stu, we were talking about the boring machine, of course, and the issues there with the pipeline from Ontario, but you guys just don't show up on my radar. What shows up on my radar, I have to start writing, signing those big claims checks. Peter was your advisor for a long time. He recently retired. He's always had good things to say about the district. So you guys are in a unique position in that, with the big discounts up front, and really, it's even more impressive that you get a check because you're getting the premium discounted 50% up front, and you're still getting a check. So
okay.
that's really a big issue. When you see out there, and you'll see that you guys are on the President's Award list every time as well. Those are for districts that have a loss ratio of 20% or less. Premiums or losses are 20% or less than premiums over a period of time. So those are just sort of insurance metrics that get looked at, and you guys always fall to the top. So it's not easy. You will have a claim eventually. You still have small claims come through. There are automobile accidents, fender benders, people get injured in the field, but, you know, you guys just don't see those really large mammoth claims. I don't know that I've ever seen one large there. So, and that's thanks, you know, because Kevin's doing them, so you guys get to avoid them.
Well, I appreciate that. I guess I was probably a little bit fishing for compliments, and you gave them, so thank you.
All
But
right.
I wanted to make sure for staff too, that they know that their hard work and their work to keep our claims low and that kind of thing, it doesn't go unnoticed. So just,
very good.
it's noticed a little differently this year, which is perfectly fine. And, you know, insurance is insurance, so
Yeah.
it's going to have, I appreciate that, the carefulness with which you look at all of that and then look going forward to make sure that, you know, we're still funded safely and with enough revenue. So thank you.
Yeah. We've been fortunate at JPIA. It's been the executive committees now and in the past, they've been pretty conservative about it. So it's put us in, as Adrian says, a very strong financial position. She could compare us to other cities and counties and let us know right away that we've done a good job over the years. So
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I'll just make a comment, you know.
still no
Just
check,
because.
sorry.
Still no check, dang it. No, but to Laura's point, you know, Laura, we've seen Randall quite often with big checks. That's generally what hey, where's my check? Every time we see him. So this district and the employees have made this part very enjoyable for us all the time because these guys make presentations. They come all the way down here to do this for us and make sure that we are recognized for the efforts of our employees and what they achieve in this area. So it's been pretty frequent. So, and we'll ring that bell all day long. So, but thank you guys for coming down here and sharing all this stuff with us. We really appreciate it.
I'm sorry, I thought of one more. If we don't already have it, maybe we get a copy of your PowerPoint?
Oh, absolutely, and he has it online, he has
Oh,
it. He's the one
perfect.
that invents it.
Okay,
Steve's
thank
been
you.
doing it for us, so. Yeah, might have something to take with you to conference on. And make sure you read all 180 pages of that board packet's about to go out. Nothing better than an audited financial statement to keep you engrossed for a long.
We'll read it.
All right,
He'll show up with folded pages and ask
well,
questions.
good. The more questions, it makes it more interactive and more
Oh,
information.
no, she'll have this thing highlighted, dog-eared. She's got little tags sticking out.
You know, just talk to Adrian.
She's all good.
Just talk to Adrian.
Absolutely.
Great, well,
Thank you, guys. Thanks for the
thank you very
opportunity.
much. Congratulations to both of you on your retirement and your stepping up, and we look forward to seeing you next year.
Thanks.
And for our staff and our management, thank you for the job that you do, so that we're not being asked to send more money, and you're all healthy and safe, and we like it that way. So,
Well, no
thank
one
you.
wants to be injured, so we're really careful about that. And we don't like people out of work, so we're really careful about it. It just works out really well. And, you know, credit to all the teams sitting out here and the way they lead them, but it's really important to us. It's a value in the organization.
No question. Okay, brings us to the consent calendar. Tammy, did we receive any public comment on consent calendar?
We have not.
Okay. Anyone in the audience wish to make a public comment on consent calendar? Any board member wish to pull anything from the consent calendar?
Move to approve that. Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar as presented. Tammy, when you're ready, would you please call the roll?
Thank you. Director Torres?
Yes.
Director Dinstedt?
Aye.
Director Roten?
Yes.
Director Risby?
Yes.
President Gardner?
Aye.
Thank you. President Gardner, the motion carries 5-0.
Great, thank you very much. Mr. Miller, have we anything to add to the agenda?
Nothing to add today.
Okay, thank you. Brings us to our action items. The first one is a construction contract for almost $3.5 million It looks like Derek is making the presentation. Craig, did you want to introduce any of it?
No, this is, went through committee. Derek will make a presentation to the board. Derek?
Great, thank you. Good morning, directors. This is part of Western's pipeline replacement program. This is for the Woodcrest Area Water Pipelines Replacement Project. You'll see a map on your screen. Under this program, Western is replacing aged pipeline that has experienced multiple leaks. Typically, this pipe is asphalt-wrapped pipe that is experiencing excessive corrosion. This phase of the program is concentrating on pipes within various areas within Western's retail service area. And again, the map shows all the various locations. For this group of pipelines, staff advertised the design on Planet Bids and received 6 bids. The lowest responsive bid was for $3,202,064 by CHI Construction of Anaheim, California. And correction, that was not for bids for design, but bids for construction. For reference, the engineer's estimate was $2.8 million. Staff also requested proposals for construction management services. LAE Associates has submitted the highest ranked proposal. LAE's fee of $274,481.55 is about 8% of the construction contract and considered to be a reasonable fee for this scope of work. The budget for this phase of the program is $4.78 million, and there are 4 requested approval items for the board today. Number 1, approve an increase of $4,180,000 to the board-adopted fiscal year 22-23 capital improvement and facilities plan from the remaining $600,000 to $4.78 million for the pipeline replacement program under the Riverside Potable Water Asset Replacement Fund 205. Number 2, approve a capital budget of $4.78 million for the Woodcrest Area Water Pipeline Replacement Project under the Riverside Potable Water Asset Replacement Fund 205. And number 3, award a construction contract for the project in the amount of $3,404,064 to CHI Construction of Anaheim, California. And that's for the construction of the project. And number 4, to award a professional services contract for construction management and inspection in the amount of $274,481.55, and that's to LAE Associates of Placentia, California. We do have present in the room representing a few folks interested in this project. The first one is from CHI Construction. That is Mitch Darwish. And we also have, for the CM contract, NASA Abazadeh. I just met him this morning. He told me how to pronounce it. And those are the folks who are representing for the awards. We're available for answering any questions, and I now open it to any questions.
Thank you. Tammy, do we have any public comment on this one?
We do not.
Okay. Would either of the vendors that are present like to say anything, or are you here primarily to answer questions if we have them? Okay. Comments for questions from board members?
I just have a couple, just more for clarification and public. Are any, I assume, I mean, I know for a fact the 2 that are south are in Western, but the one pipeline that's north, if you can scroll up, that is owned by Western, it's not part of the city?
No, that's not part of the city.
Okay.
Those are ours.
And then when we created the CIP project, the CIP budget, was the $600,000 that is remaining already allocated for this project? And then the design was completed, or does that make sense? Like it just,
Exactly.
the timeline moved up?
Yes, it's so the way we budget our projects and we ask the board for a budget is I'll approach you and say, we are going to go to the next phase, which is design, and we'll only allocate those monies and that's the 600,000 that you're seeing. Once we know how much the whole project costs, I'm here before you, and I'll ask for the budget approval for the whole amount.
Okay. I move to approve.
Any other questions or comments?
I have a quick question.
Question? Go right ahead.
Yes. Just wanted to hear from both of the contractors, if they would be so kind.
Sure. So can we have Mitch and Nasa come up?
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you coming out while we award these projects, because there's some big bucks attached to these. So thank you so much for being here. Just want to make sure that we are good with all of the bid documents and everything you didn't see any problems in all discussions with staff, and you're good with the project.
We are all clear, the plans are clear, and we don't expect any problems or any change orders,
Perfect, because I'm your no change order girl.
I understand.
I like on time and on budget.
It's funny every time. I have actually, just to piggyback off of, I actually don't see the CHI's proposal or bid documents. I have the details. That was the only thing that I meant to ask.
That should actually be, in the package. And,
Yeah.
So basically,
I don't know what you have.
you're saying for the CHA for the, well, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're saying for the construction contract?
Yeah, or
Yeah,
or
typically-
proposal. We
Yeah,
have
so
those in
typically
here.
for the construction contract, so we'll see a proposal for the CM, and we bid that based on professional services. For the construction, essentially what we're doing is we get all the bids, and we don't put the specs or the bid package in there. What we do is we describe our review of all of the bids that came in, and we just do a check to make sure that they are indeed responsive to the item, and they're responsible. And that's essentially all you'll see in there. And as long as they're responsive and responsible, then we have to award to the lowest bidder.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, I just had to.
Can you, there's a difference between the proposal and a bid.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of the question too, is why is a bid, am I interpreting right, why is a bid handled a little bit differently than the proposals and it's
Just-
not listed here?
But I just was saying, I didn't see it in here.
No, the ranking is in there though, so that's always the way that we've been given it. At least that's the way I've seen it ever, so.
That's right.
All
For,
of them
for a
are
project
ranked.
like this, generally all you'll see is what the bid is, and that, again, that review that it's indeed responsive and they're responsible bidder.
Okay.
Great.
Perfect. Nope, those were all my questions. I just wanted to make sure we on time, on budget, so.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for
Actually,
being
we-
here today. Appreciate it.
We'll actually accept ahead of schedule and under budget.
Well,
Time injuries.
100%, we will take that.
Thank you very much.
Okay, any other questions or comments from board members? If not, we do have a motion and a second, and Tammy, when you're ready, would you please
Can we
call the
please
roll?
review who made the motion and who made the second?
The motion was Director Torres, the second was Director Risby.
Thank you. Thank you for the confirmation. Director Torres?
Yes.
Director Dinstedt?
Aye.
Director Roten?
Yes.
Director Risby?
Yes.
President Gardner?
Aye,
Thank you. The motion carries 5-0.
Thank you, directors.
thank you. And Derek, I'm not sure you get to go away quite yet.
I do.
All right, so item 8B is approving the project funding for a comprehensive Marietta water quality improvement project. Might be called a program. We had an extensive presentation at EOWR out at El Sobrante, talking about all the different elements that are in this program. So this is, us being very proactive to say, we've got more work to do out there to make sure we can ensure appropriate water quality for our Marietta customers. So it went well at committee. It was a huge amount of information, so Derek is bringing that to the board to kind of summarize it.
Great, thank you. So just as Craig said, we have presented this before. We've actually gone through the slides and shortened it. Certainly welcome to dive in if you have any other questions about it, but I just covered the top level things to describe what the issues that we're dealing with and how we're choosing to try and address it. So next slide. So what is the challenge? The challenge is that the Murrieta service area has been continuing to experience discoloration events from the continued addition of small amounts of manganese from the North Well, number 2, that's the newest well we just put on, and it's mixing with legacy deposits. Those are deposits that have accumulated over the course of time from either the current wells or the past wells that are been taken out of service. Those deposits remaining in the system, when they mix the two, you'll get a color event depending on what disturbance happens in the system. And also, the other challenge is that the North Well 2 groundwater supply will soon exceed the notification level for manganese. I'll go into this in a little bit in detail in a bit. It's just that the goalpost
I
is
would
being
say that
moved.
different. I would say we'll soon exceed. The
Yeah.
criteria is lowering.
Yeah.
Our water quality is not getting worse. They're lowering.
Yeah, and I was going to say the goalpost is being moved on us, and we've been given a warning. They basically said that they're going to change that, what that is, and at a certain point, we'll be over the notification limit. And I'll go into that in detail in a bit. So next slide. So let's talk a little bit about iron and manganese. So iron and manganese, first, is they're naturally occurring metals. These are elements that are in the earth, and if you're taking out groundwater, you'll have materials like this present within the water. It's very common. And they can have an aesthetic impact on water. The aesthetic impact is a brown or a rust color, sometimes blackish. And that can stain porcelain or plumbing or clothing even. And it can also promote iron and manganese bacteria growth. A little word on that, when you hear bacteria, that doesn't necessarily mean bad for humans, because there's all kinds of bacteria, and this kind of bacteria basically reduces the metal and uses it to kind of eat. But it doesn't harm humans. The problem is when the bacteria does its thing, it can change it to something that causes discoloration. And that's the thing that we're concerned about. Next slide. So what about our particular system? So Northwell produces, and I'm going to do a little bit of units here, and it's important later when it comes to regulations. So Northwell produces 0.025 to 0.04 milligrams per liter of manganese. Now you'll see the charts up on the display there. It's in different units. These are micrograms. So a microgram is just 1,000. There's 1,000 micrograms per milligram. And so you'll see that the limit is in the red line, and that's called a secondary MCL. So a secondary maximum contaminant limit. Now, secondary maximum contaminant limits are aesthetic, meaning that they're not health-based. They're more, if you go over this, then there's concerns about the aesthetics of the water changing. You'll see in the graph that from the North Well, the manganese is below that line, and it's been there since we brought the well online. Now, new clay, you'll see the graph below, is for new clay. That's our other well that we have, and it's been essentially non-detect coming from the well. So that's way below that secondary MCL. So really it's North Well is the one that's the issue. And both wells produce negligible amounts of iron, but we do see iron in the system. Well, where does that come? Some of that's legacy, some of it could be some rusting of some of the pipes, older pipes that are getting exposed, and that also causes coloration. So there are legacy materials within the system, and that can range from sand, silt, clay, biofilms, iron, and manganese. So there's those things that just accumulate in the system when you have a groundwater system, using groundwater in the system. So next slide. So let's talk about the regulatory considerations. So the State Water Resources Control Board and the Division of Drinking Water have proposed lowering the notification level for manganese. And that came in, they put out a notification to everyone saying like, hey, we're considering changing our notification limit. So that gets our attention. So that's very recent, March. And that's going to affect Northwell. So on the previous slide you saw there is the SMCL, which is a secondary limit. There's a notification limit that they're putting in. So what that means is if you have a notification, you go over it, you have to notify. You notify the board, and you notify the areas that would be affected. That's a public agency, such as the county or the city. You just say, notify them, hey, I see this limit. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's a health type issue or you have to take any action. However, we really don't want to be doing those notifications, so we want to stay ahead of it. So now that we've been notified, we know, well, looks like it takes some time for us to put something in place to get below that limit, And that's what we're doing today. We're asking you to do that. Whenever it gets adopted, it'll be about a year after it gets adopted that you have to do the notification. So we think we'll be under that if we do the actions that we're considering today. So next slide. So what have we been doing in the meanwhile? So operations has been doing an excellent job of really trying to get the material, the Lego materials out. They've been doing a lot of flushing. We spent about $100,000 on doing no-des type flushing. That's zero discharge type flushing, and it captures it in bags. We've been able to remove material. We have some images on here showing some of that flushing program. When you flush, you try and increase the velocity, and you're trying to mobilize materials that are sitting at the bottom of the pipe or maybe adhered to the sides of the pipe, and that comes out. So once you get it out, then it can't go in. Once you lower the velocities to the normal velocities, they're just taking the water that's up above, and that's generally clear water. So next slide.
Derek?
Yes.
Do you mind if I ask a question, or should I
Sure.
wait till
No, you
then?
can ask now. Go ahead.
Okay, back on the regulatory considerations.
Sure, back
Couple
2 slides.
back, yeah. So it has the prior notification, the new one. Is there a brief history as to why that is being changed?
Sure. So there's been a lot of studies on manganese in water, and that the current SMEL, there's a question as if it's in the right place, as evidenced by our own system. We're below that level right now, and it's going in, and we're in compliance. Yet, we have color events.
We're still having,
Right?
okay.
And so there's been a lot of studies looking at water chemistry and what happens when you mix 2 different sources, and what happens to legacy materials as they sit there, and also a whole host of things that changes if it's going to cause a color event. And so with all these studies, California's looking at it and they go like, well, we probably need to lower that so that we don't have these type of color events, because that's what that secondary MCL is for, is to handle aesthetics.
Okay.
The first
So-
thing they're going to do is a notification limit. They still have to do the MCL, which takes a lot more work. There's a lot of stuff you have to do to change the MCL. There's public board meetings like this. You have commentary. That takes a few years. So the first step usually is just to change the notification limit before they do that. And that's what they're doing right now.
Okay, thank you.
All right. 2 slides ahead. So what are we going to be doing as far as managing the color events that we are dealing with right now? Well, we're proposing to implement a comprehensive unidirectional flushing program. And essentially what this is you do water modeling and you determine which valves to close, and you make the water go in one direction really fast, and you push it out. And so it's a much more intensive program where you have to be in the system, and you go out with all the operators, they shut off certain systems and run it, and then after you get it out, you return the system back to normal. And we have a number of different zones that we'll be doing this with. So we anticipate it'll probably take probably over a year to get through the whole system doing this. And then when you're done, maybe you start over again, or you see how you're doing and maybe you go back to different zones. We're also talking about putting a camera in to inspect the interior of the pipeline. The thing about doing flushing is it doesn't necessarily get adhered materials. There's a lot of literature on this where you have stuff that can stick to the sides of the walls, and no matter how fast you get it to going, it's going to stay sticking there. And so the concern with that is that we want to see if we do have those materials, did we get everything? So we're going to put some cameras in, take a look. If it turns out that you do have excessive adherent materials, let's say for the larger diameter pipelines where you can't get the velocity up really high, then we have to look at doing foam swabbing. So we're going to do a trial program where you basically take a big Q-tip. I'm really simplifying, but you take a Q-tip and you push it through and you get the stuff out. And then you can actually escalate from there. There's different types of things that you can put into the pipe to get that adherent material out. And then we're also talking about doing wellhead treatment. Now, wellhead treatment is to prevent the manganese from getting into the system in the first place. I'll do a little bit more in the next slide. Next slide, please. So this is where we come to the capital request. We want to procure a low-pressed green sand filtration system. What that is it's a modular system that you put out there to basically, they deliver the whole system and you basically hook it up and it runs. And I've talked to the folks over at Rancho, and they said theirs is doing great. They hardly have to interface with it. You just plug it in and it works. So we're really sure that the system will work. It can treat it to below 0.01 milligrams per liter, and that's below where most of the literature says that you would not get color events. So that's good. The other thing that's good is that it's below the notification limit. So we will not have to do any reporting once this thing is in. Then we're also talking about engaging Tetra Tech as a designer. So we're going to do some, finish off the designs, do the selection of the equipment, make sure it's the right equipment, you know, what orientation, the site layout, and all of that. We've been working with them for doing the preliminary type research, and they've been very speedy and responsive for doing this work. They will also be the construction manager. They will help out our operations team for putting this together. And that's the third item. The third item is that Western staff will be installing this wellhead treatment. We'll be going out there and hooking the whole thing up, doing some on-site the yard piping, all of that type of stuff with our own staff. The advantage to this is that it would be expedited, and we might have some savings compared to the current expensive bidding market. The bidding market, as you know, has been coming up much higher than we have as far as our estimates, and if we have it with in-house staff, we can control that. So next slide, please. So let's just take a quick look at the draft site plan. This is conceptual, doesn't necessarily mean what we'll be putting in finally, but it just shows you that we laid it out and we said we can fit it on the current site. It's a tight site for this. It's a small site. We've done the profile of this one so it lays down outside. You might see on some wellhead treatments, if you drive down on the 215, you see off to the side, Riverside has one. They have these tanks all kind of sticking up. We're going to do this one so it kind of lays down, so it's laying down low and squat, and we try and minimize the impacts. And let's see, anything else to point out? I think there was a question during committee as far as noise, again, it's not the same noise level as, say, a pump running. This is just, we're going off of the pressure that pushes it through the system, and so we're really not adding noise, and we don't expect it to be a noisy addition to the site. Next slide, please. So what are the staff recommendations? So one, we are asking the board to approve an increase of $2,394,475 to the board-adopted fiscal year 22-23 capital improvements and facility plan, and a corresponding capital project budget for the North Well 2 wellhead treatment project. And this is going to be out of Fund 234. We also want to approve an interfund loan from Western Municipal Water District's General Fund to the Marietta Water Operating Fund 230 in the amount of $2,394,475. And this is going to be at an annual interest rate of 1.9% and a 20-year term to fund the project. This is essentially this particular fund does not have enough funds in the reserves to cover this, and so what you do is you take this from the general fund and you loan that money, but to keep the general fund whole, you have to pay it back on a loan. The fund will pay that back over time, and you have to set a percentage rate for that, and that's what we're setting, the 1.9%. Next slide. We're going to award a professional engineering service contract with Tetra Tech Incorporated in the amount of $293,000 for design and construction support of the wellhead treatment equipment following Western's purchasing policy guidelines for a sole or single source purchase. And we want to approve a purchase order in the amount of $584,750 for the purchase of a water filtration system from Lowprest following Western's purchasing policy guidelines for a sole or single source purchase. Next slide. Sorry, there's a lot of items in this one. We also want to approve an operating budget increase in the Marietta Water Fund, Fund 230, in the amount of $400,000 for the Marietta Distribution Pipeline Cleaning and Interior Inspection Program. That's the flushing that I was talking about earlier. And then we want to approve a operating budget increase in the Marietta Water Fund 230 again, in the amount of $100,000 for removal, inspection, and repair of the reinstallation of the North Well 2 pump. A little quick aside on this, as we were writing in between the committee and this meeting, we had to add this item because we were doing some testing of the the water column to see, with a camera basically, to see if there's any issues with sanding or something like that with the well. And we did discover that the well, essentially the shaft was moving a bit too much, and so we need to investigate that. So we're going to pull it out and make sure that everything's okay with that so it doesn't get worse. Next slide, please. And we want to approve an operating budget increase in the general district fund, Fund 100, in the amount of $75,000 for community outreach in support of the North 2 wellhead treatment project and the distribution pipeline cleaning program. And there'll be a little bit more than this later. And we want to authorize the general manager to execute contracts within the approved budget requested to procure the necessary equipment and professional services contract for the North Well 2 treatment project and Murrieta distribution pipeline cleaning and interior inspection program and the community outreach. You'll see in the budget there's some other small items that we need to hire folks for. And next slide. So what's the overall program costs? So we have the wellhead treatment, that's $2,394,475. The pipeline cleaning, $400,000. The pump inspection and repair, $100,000, and the community outreach, $75,000. So we got a total of $2,969,475 for this program. Next slide, please.
Derek,
Yes.
before you go on, quick question. Was it item 6 on the staff recommendations that you said was added after the committee meeting?
Yes, that's the one that's the action item that was added.
Okay, and then, and I apologize because we probably discussed this in committee, but item 2, it's on page 10 of the PowerPoint.
Back to
So that interfund loan, obviously, we pay that back. It has the information about that, but how do we pay that back? Did we talk about that? Where do
well,
the funds come from to pay it back?
There will be a slide on this.
Oh,
and actually, I'm
okay.
going to go ahead and call on Kevin. In fact, I was just about to pass it to Kevin.
Oh, okay.
So I'm gonna
Sorry about that.
Run away.
Okay, all right.
No, so if we go ahead, did you have any other
No,
questions?
no, that
Okay,
was my only other one.
We'll go to that. So let's go back to, so I was about to turn this over. For fiscal impacts, Kevin, if you could go over some of the fiscal impacts.
Great, thank you, Derek. Well, I wish I could say it was free, but clearly there are, from the recommendations, financial impacts on both during the time of construction as well as ongoing in order to cover the operations and maintenance costs of the wellhead treatment. So on this slide, during the construction period of time, we will have to take the North Well number 2 offline. What happens then is that we need to then purchase more water from Eastern Municipal Water District, more so than what was in our budget, of course. And their cost of water, being metropolitan and other related costs, is about 5 times more than the cost of groundwater. So it is substantial. I think the $1.4 million will be more than enough to cover those periodic purchases during the construction time. And Derek also mentioned that there'll be the cleaning of the system, outreach, and so forth. So combined, about $2 million. Well, the operating reserve for Murrieta Water, that would draw it the operating reserves below the minimum reserve target that our board has approved through the reserve policy. And so what's the remedy that staff is proposing? Well, it's that we would suspend asset replacement funding for 2 years. And it's about $1 million, as you can see there, for each of the years, for a total of 2. The asset replacement funding, where does that come from? That comes from ratepayers, and it comes from the operating reserve. So the operating reserve collects money for asset replacement in the rates and then makes an annual transfer to the asset replacement reserve. And that would be suspended for those 2 years. Another option is that you could borrow the money for these one-time operating costs. However, I guess the equivalent to that would be like using your credit card and paying it off over time for 1 month's worth of groceries. So when you borrow money, you really want it to be for an asset that'll bring you production and benefit over time, which is one of the recommendations, is that we would pay for the capital portion of this endeavor by a loan with the general district. So,
And then next slide, please.
thank you. So this slide shows, some rough ideas of what it would, the impact of the project would be on customer water rates, and certainly the treatment costs would increase. And that would affect, that source of supply cost, that affects the commodity rate, and we have water budget rates in that area, so it primarily would affect Tier 1 and Tier 2. Tier 1 would be affected most because we put our lowest cost water where we assign our lowest cost water to the rate of Tier 1, which is health and safety water. And so 100% of all the water we expect to sell in Tier 1 comes from well water. And that cost would be going up due to the treatment cost day in and day out. Tier 2 does have a little bit of groundwater in it, but it's mostly buying that water from Eastern, and therefore the weighted average cost of the water supply there would only have an overall 2% impact. And then back to the question earlier from Director Roten is, well, how do we pay back the debt service cost to the general fund? That's best covered in a fixed cost, and the only fixed cost we have down there is that monthly system charge that we charge all of our customers based on the meter size. So you see there, it would add about $1.48, for example, to a 3/4 inch meter, or about 3% rate increase for the fixed system charge. Okay, what does that mean? That's the next bolded bullet. And the weighted average residential monthly bill would basically increase about $5.50, or 4.5%, which is pretty significant. That's in addition to what was already planned. You know, we generally have a 3 to 4% rate increase each year anyway, just to accommodate rising labor and maintenance costs and so forth. And so you probably will see something like an 8 to 9% rate increase. However, nothing is being proposed at this time that would affect rates, specifically changing to change rates. What we'll do is that we'll look at these financial impacts when we get closer to the next rate adjustment cycle, and then be able to communicate exactly how these programs and costs will affect the next proposed rates that we bring to the board. Next slide. I'll turn it over to Sarah.
Good morning, thank you. You know, since the construction of North Well 2, we've really been highly engaged in the Murrieta community and also responding to some of the challenges that we're seeing. And this is a great opportunity to bring a program forward and just show another example of how Western's meeting the moment and ensuring our water quality is the best possible. And so it's important we continue those efforts through communication and high engagement, as you know, they might experience some short-term pain for the long-term gain, so to speak. So we have proposed a variety of strategies that will come alongside this project, including, again, that is a proactive, sustained education engagement effort using a variety of outreach tools. We know that different voices and partners need different ways of hearing what's happening and how it will impact them. And so we want to offer those. We will be doing a blended approach in terms of kind of community-wide education about these proactive efforts, and then some more targeted activities for those customers that might experience some intermittent discoloration events that we want to partner with and respond to in real time through coordination of our communications team, our customer service experience groups, as well as our water quality team. So we'll be ensuring that internal coordination and process so that we can meet our customers as these programs are implemented in the community. In terms of messaging, our approach will be to acknowledge that we are committed to delivering the highest water quality possible, and that those that are experiencing discoloration, we know that's unacceptable. So again, partnering with us. We want to confirm that their water is safe to drink, while also educating customers what we have done in the past and what's happening in their neighborhood now, and then affirming our commitment to transparency. So that's a very high level offering of the type of strategies and approach that we'll be applying during the duration, both before, during, and after this program is implemented in the community, should the board advance this forward. I'll turn that back over to Derek.
Great, thank you. So if we go to the next slide, this is just the questions portion. If you have any questions, we're available.
Okay. First, Tammy, do we have any public comment?
We do not.
Anyone in the room with a comment? Okay, bring it back to the board. Are there questions, additional questions or comments?
Yes. Couple questions.
Okay, go for it.
You know it was coming, Derek.
Yes.
First of all, thank you for the presentation. I know you guys have done a lot of work on this. I know this has been a ongoing project and a struggle, and something that we've really been trying to resolve for a lot of years, to try to figure out what's been going on as we've progressed down through the system and trying to figure all that out. So I appreciate all the work that staff has done on this and trying to maintain stuff. One, let's address how long are you anticipating this project is going to take? That wasn't addressed in the presentation.
So according to the current schedule, we would actually have the well up by, and so we haven't really approved it. So basically, probably into 2024, the early part of 2024, is when we'd have essentially the treatment in.
Okay. And are there any anticipated inconveniences for shutdowns to customers in the area that would be affected?
For the cleaning program, yes, there will be in the community, and we'll be closing off certain valves in order to get that unidirectional flushing going, and that's going to be part of the outreach, is why we have to warn them ahead of time that, hey, this is going to be happening. They'll still have access to water. The water will be going. It'll just be that in some cases, the pressure might be reduced. And also, if there is discoloration, after all, what we're trying to do is move that out, and we're purposefully disturbing everything, we want to warn them ahead of time that this is happening and for them to contact us if it is. And it should clear up actually very quickly after they come through and do the unidirectional flushing. So I anticipate those would be some of the interruptions. As far as constructing the well, I wouldn't anticipate interruption to service as far as the wellhead treatment. The well will be offline. They won't really notice as far as water surface with respect to that.
Okay. And then, just for the sake of the public, why not just jump into the wellhead treatment? Why bother doing all the other stuff?
Oh, you really do have to do both hand in hand. So the system has been on wells for quite some time, and what we essentially have is some legacy material that's in there. Some it's adhered to the inside. There's a lot of literature talking about how manganese is stubborn to get off of it. If it's adhered to the pipes, it's really stubborn. And so if you were to put the wellhead treatment in, we'd risk that, let's say some event happens, like someone crashes into a fire hydrant, and then there's a bunch of water that comes out that will disturb materials, and potentially you'd have a color event. Then the question would be like, well, wait, you put wellhead treatment, why am I still getting a color event? And so really we have to tackle both. We have to do the cleaning program, and we have to prevent new stuff from getting in.
Okay.
I would add a little bit to that, just for a historical perspective, is when Western took over that system, it was 100% groundwater.
Yes.
So it was a whole bunch of wells that were feeding that system. There was no imported water connection. The wells were old and deteriorating, and as a well deteriorates, the screen deteriorates. It has bigger holes that allows sediment to actually go into the system, and it's quite frankly, it's been a challenging program ever since we've taken over that system to get that material back out of all the little pipes that it goes throughout the whole network. So we've been pursuing it, and we have to just keep doing it. As Derek said, it is just very stubborn material.
No, thank you for that. And then another question, just for sake of discussion, and I don't know that I'm going to get any answer that I want here, but anyways. The wheeling agreement that we have in place for Rancho California Water District to use pipe, is that a more cost-effective way that we could look at instead of doing the Los Alamos connection with the expensive water coming from Eastern? Is there any opportunity there that we could flip that?
We will investigate that in the future. The agreement that was approved by both Rancho and Western is for the innovation zone. We do not yet have an agreement with Rancho to build an interconnection into the general service area of Murrieta. Once we do that, we will investigate that. However, I would remind that the cost of water, the largest cost of water is imported water itself, not necessarily the wheeling. So it probably will not change much.
No, just want to ask the question, so make sure that I want everybody to know that you guys look at all the options and we look at all the alternatives before we actually come forward with a proposal. So these are things that are discussed at great length as we go into all this process. And then just wanted to know if any of the awardee proponents, people that are going to benefit from this are here today and
Sure.
available.
Yes, so what we have Steve Tedesco from Tetra Tech, and they're the ones who are doing the design and helping out with the construction. And then we also have Randy Ritchie from Lowprest.
Okay, great. Gentlemen, do you mind coming up and, great. Thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate it. This is something that staff have been working on for a tremendous amount of time and spend a lot of energy on this, and we're looking forward to ultimately solving all of our problems down there. And being the local girl down there, and I'm actually receiving this water, I want to make sure that We're going to stay on time, on budget, and everything is going to go great. So any problems with anything that you saw in the proposals?
No, we're not expecting any problems. We spent a lot of time with the district staff and working out who's going to do what on the project, and we're not expecting to have any issues at all.
And no issues from equipment supply.
I will add that we're purchasing the equipment. Our staff is going to be doing the installation
Okay.
to save money.
Great. No, and that's fantastic. So certainly appreciate you being here today and being a part of this solution for us. Marietta is certainly looking forward to this. I've been a area resident down there for 22 plus years, so I'm looking forward to having this issue resolved and not having my neighbors knock on my door anymore about why does my water look like this? It's all good. So thank you so much. And with that, Mr. President, I would move to approve this item.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. I think there may be some more discussion. Director Rizvi?
Yeah, I just have a real quick question. Maybe you can answer. So when we talk about that eventually we might have to look into increasing the rates, when we discuss that, does that only affect Marietta area?
Correct.
Yes, yeah, so, and that's what drives the interfund borrowing. So every area is a standalone financial unit. So Marietta stands alone, the Riverside area stands alone. It's not fair for the Riverside customers to pay for what's happening in Marietta and vice versa. And just like Marb stands alone. So that's why we have to do the interfund borrowing. It's a really good question. And when Kevin's very purposefully not saying what the rate increase will be in the future, because what we do is Kevin and his team will analyze it at that period of time, because everything changes a little bit. So we'll reevaluate all the numbers and figure out what we need to keep those customers whole in Marietta. But that's a really good question about the fund centers, because everyone has to stand alone. And luckily, we have a reserve that we can go to, so we're paying interest back to ourselves rather than going externally and borrowing the money from the outside and paying interest to someone else.
Perfect, thank you.
Is that it? Other questions? I have just a couple. One is on the interest that will be paid back. Gentlemen, I think we're done with you. Thank you. We're going to pay 1.9% interest. Essentially, Marietta is going to repay the Western General Fund 1.9% a year for 20 years. The investments in our general fund there are a few fixed assets, but others, the earnings rate may vary. Does it make sense to change the interest rate annually based on what the general fund investment made the prior year? Because I expect in some years we'll overcollect and in some years we may undercollect, and it may balance out, but have you thought about that? Does that make any sense?
It does make sense because you could have, in essence, a variable rate, is what you're saying. So it would reflect the portfolio, weighted average interest rate for the time period. Keep in mind, though, that then it would vary every single year, which would be, of course, we wouldn't know what it is until after the fact.
Right.
And it could go much higher, it could go much lower. Right now with a 1.9, really good low rate. But we chose a fixed interest rate mainly because it's a known project, it's a set amount of dollars, a set period of time, and then helps with rate setting as far as keeping it flat and steady throughout all the years. But that is another alternative that was talked about, doing a variable rate in essence.
Yeah, looking just at Western's general reserve, that seems like a safer path, that the reserve isn't either losing money that it wouldn't have lost otherwise, or artificially enriching itself. So I don't know if I don't know how you feel about doing a retroactive change. You're right, it would show up as a different cost year to year, or it could. Likely it would. So I would look for some guidance and a recommendation, but it seems to me that if you look at what the fund made the prior year and use that rate, that it will be more accurate.
Right, so the accuracy may increase, but probably, I'm guessing that maybe over the term of the 20 years, it may come out about the same as there's ebbs and flows in the market. This, to be quite frank, administratively is very easy to ensure it happens. It'll be built into the rates. Like if we do a 4-year or 3-year, 2-year rate increase, we have something of certainty when it comes to that debt service requirement. Won't change throughout the entire 20 years. So that's where we've tended to favor toward the more the administrative benefit, as well as likely over time, there may not be much difference.
Okay, that makes sense. And then, Derek, a question for you. We added the $100,000 to take the pump off the well and do some work on the shaft. That's a pretty new well. Is there any warranty on the shaft?
Well, we'd look and see if there was a warranty issue. Right now, we're still trying to troubleshoot to find out why it would be doing that. One of the theories is that the water coming in is coming in from a certain layer of the aquifer at a much faster rate than is above where the limit we'd want it to be, in which case it would have to have nothing to do with warranty. It could be we pull it out and we look at it and like, oh my God, this is a warranty issue, and we would have to pursue that.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we look at that. Is it, I don't know the length of the warranty, but it is a new well, and I just want to make sure that we are taking a look at that, and we will attempt to collect if it's appropriate to do so.
No, of course, that's what we would.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's all of my questions. If no one has additional questions, then we have a motion and a second. And Tammy, would you call the roll when you're ready?
Yes, thank you. Director Torres?
Yes.
Director Dinstead?
Aye.
Director Roten?
Yes.
Director Risby?
Yes.
President Gardner?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries 5-0.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank you,
directors.
Derek. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate you coming in. Okay, 8C is to approve the Santa Ana River Conservation and Conjunctive Use Program Interagency Banking Facilities Operating Agreement, and authorize the general manager to implement that. Presentation by Ryan. Craig, did you want to?
May I recognize Ryan Shaw? He's going to talk about this again. We didn't really discuss at committee. There was not much discussion about the value of the SARCUP program, but the board got very enthusiastic as to how much money we should set aside to buy water to go into that.
Yes.
So the board asked us to go back and reevaluate our recommendation, which originally was $10 million set aside to buy water over the next 3 years. So Ryan will probably focus a little bit more on that today. But we did go back to the drawing board and have a very robust analysis and discussion about that. So Ryan?
We did. Thank you, Craig. Good morning. Hopefully you and your families are doing well. I was going to joke and wish I had a check for you, but I'm here to ask for a bunch of money, I guess.
You want the check.
Yeah. I think we have a presentation, but in general, there's 2 asks of the board this morning. The first is the SARCUP agreement, which is a long time coming. And the second is, as Craig mentioned, an ask for some authority to purchase wet water in the next couple of years for storage purposes. So while we're pulling it up, I think I mentioned it at the engineering committee. This SARCUP, Santa Ana River Conservation and Conjunctive Use Program, is 15 years plus in the making. So it's a long-term program. This is a big milestone for us and the other agencies. There's been a series of agreements over the years that we've approved, starting with DWR, Prop 84, the grant funding that made this all happen. That goes through SAPA. It was a $55 million grant award for a series of projects that would allow conjunctive use to occur throughout the watershed. The other 2 aspects I mentioned, just as a frame of reference. So there's three prongs to this SARCUP program. First is water use efficiency, kind of budget-based rate structures were proposed throughout the watershed. 2, habitat restoration, up and down the river, mostly for St. Anna Sucker, but there's additional benefits that come along with that. But this agreement before you today is focused on the conjunctive use side of that three-prong approach here. We don't have it? That's okay. All right, I can wing it. I got it. I've
It'll
been
be
doing
there,
this for
and
15
give me
years.
like give me 2 seconds here.
So the presentation was for EOWR. We're pulling up the EOWR presentation, so.
Gotcha. Apologies. Like I said, I think I can wing it. I've been talking about this for a long time. So the agreement before you, action number 1, is an agreement that all the SARCUP agencies are approving, and it fundamentally, it outlines the rules and regulations, if you will, of how we're going to buy, store, and produce water under the program. So it sets up a formal committee, which Western is a part of, Eastern, Orange County, Valley District, IUA, et cetera. So there's going to be a committee that's going to meet probably a couple times a year, realistically, and we can meet more frequent as needed. But this committee is going to be made up of management level staff that can make decisions, how and when to buy water, where to store it, and how we're going to produce it.
And Ryan, if I can add
Yeah.
a little history perspective for the board. This is the operating agreement. This board has already approved the SARCUP program and the grant application to accept the money from the state, which was $55 million for the state, and that's through SAPA. So this is the final agreement that we'll need, other than us potentially coming back with a purchase, which hopefully you're going to give me authority to do that, but I would likely come back anyway and tell the board that we're doing it. So this is kind of the last element of the entire SARCUP program. We knew that this would be coming as the last element, and it's now time. We're finally ready to do that, but it's been very complicated to figure out the operating of the system because we've got a bunch of agencies, several different places that you could put water, and a whole bunch of different ways it can be delivered. So the operating committee is very much an operating committee, and a lot of choices and documentation will be made. So sorry, Ryan, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to give a little more historic construct because I don't want the board to feel like at the last minute we're trying to finally get approval for SARCUP.
Yep, no, appreciate it. Thanks, Steve. I'll just jump right, so this is kind of where we were at. So over the last 18 months, there's been some significant agreements that this board and other boards have approved. And so, like Craig said, that hopefully this is our last big major agreement in order to execute and implement this program. I think we may be the last agency to approve this agreement. I think everybody's taking it to their boards this month. So we're on our way. Just as a reminder, this is a map showing total storage throughout the watershed for the program. It's 137,000 acre feet, which I believe is the largest conjunctive use program in Southern California. So it's pretty significant. It's a big deal. You can see there's 6 basins, groundwater basins that we're storing water in collectively. Orange County, Chino, San Bernardino, Riverside, Elsinore, and San Jacinto. And I think I have a slide later, but I'll show you the grant funding that we got from DWR will make us, allow us to move water amongst these basins. So it's 2,500 square miles is what you're looking at. It's a simple map here, but it's a huge area. So to move that water around is pretty significant. So the grant funding is going to help us do that. I think we already touched on this a little bit, but the operating committee agreement, which is what's before you today, again, is just going to kind of set the rules for how we're going to buy, store, and extract water amongst each other. The graphic on the right is just a little picture of a software program that we have that Eastern took the lead on, but it's kind of a financial tool to help us account and make sure we know what water is where and who's paid for it and who's delivering it, et cetera. This is the second map I was mentioning, but it just highlights the interconnections, recharge basins, wells, everything that went into this program to make it happen. And it doesn't do it justice, but this hopefully shows that we can move water from, literally from Chino all the way down to Elsinore through this program. So it's pretty significant, I think, compared to some of the other programs that are out there. Okay, so this agreement is going to allow us to exercise the program, right? Like I said, it's 15 years in the making, lots of agreements in place, grants, design, construction. We're at the point where we want to exercise it and implement it. So it's a really wet year, as you guys know. It's the perfect timing for SARCUP, in my perspective, to ask for some authority to go out and buy some water and store it. We don't know when it's going to be wet again, so let's go out there and get it. We had a healthy discussion at the engineering committee a couple weeks ago. We came and asked for $10 million, and I think the committee suggested, hey, if the water's there, let's go get some more. So the item before you is now up to $20 million. We debated internally, Kevin's laughing, we debated internally about what we could afford, but honestly, physically, capacity-wise, what can we actually do? So we landed on 20 million, which is about 23,000 acre-feet of water over the next couple years, right? We can't do it all at once. Like I said, we have some capacity challenges.
23,000 annually or over the 3 years?
Total.
Total, okay.
No, good question, yeah. So it'd probably be divided by 3, right, kind of thing. This water would go into the Chino Basin, the San Bernardino Basin, and/or the Riverside Arlington Basin. So we've kind of left it open-ended a little bit because it takes coordination and communication with some of those agencies that operate those basins. So we're just asking for authority to buy up to $20 million worth of water, and we will do our best to make sure we can actually make that happen. And we'll come back to the board with, frequent updates and let you know how it's going. On the slide here, strategic priorities, I think 1.5 there is the one that makes the most sense here to highlight water storage initiative. Given the last 3 years, driest 3 years ever, maybe on record, and this wet year, this is a perfect time for this program to be implemented. So with that, there's 2 asks. One is to approve the SARCUP Interagency Banking Facilities Operating Agreement, and then 2, authorize the GM to secure purchases of up to $20 million for 2022, 23, 23, 24, 24, and 25. With that, take any questions.
Okay, first, Tammy, have we any public comment?
We do not.
And no one in the room wishing to speak on that. Okay, questions or comments from board members?
I mean, I was going to ask why we didn't go higher, but it sounds like you gave that answer. And is there room for us to, allow for more in case there is a possibility?
Yeah, I think what I would hope we do is approve this request now, but with clear understanding between the board and the staff that if there are opportunities to purchase more water than this, that they would come back and request that. Because at the committee, and all 5 of us were there, the recommendation was for up to 50 million. I thought that was on the high side of what would be feasible. We might be able to buy it, but we can't, I don't think we can store that much in the time frame that's available. But if we could store more than 20, I do hope that, as you begin to see where the 20 is going, you would come back and say, hey, we can squeeze out some more. So I'm pretty confident that the board would approve up to the 50.
Yeah, I
All
don't-
right. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I don't want to jump in front of Craig and Tim, but yeah, let us make sure we can do what we say we can do. Give us a chance to perform a little bit, and then, to your point, we can always come back and ask.
All right.
It's
So-
also important to note that the pricing is based on known metropolitan pricing. If we can find water at a cheaper rate, we may be able to get our hands on more, and we'll report that back to the board. This is just an estimate based on the known pricing of metropolitan untreated water, so.
All right, thank you. So move.
Okay, we have a motion.
I'll second it, but I think Brenda has a question.
I do.
Director Dennstetter, you have a question?
Yes, I do. I'm trying to formulate how I want to ask this question. So are you not planning on storing water down in Bedford then? Is that not part of the, are they still going to have capacity down there?
No, they are. So good question. So Elsinore Valley is a part of SARCUP. They have their own storage basin, 4,500 acre feet worth of storage in that basin. What we're asking for today is above and beyond that, but they plan to store water under this program
Okay.
on their own.
And here's just a general question for information's sake. So water in this program benefits the entire district, correct?
Correct.
That is correct.
So it can be moved anywhere within our service territory,
It can be.
if it's possible.
It can be physically moved in some locations, and we'll do in lieu transfers as appropriate.
It can be moved either physically or paper transfers.
Right, no, I just want to make sure that,
Anyone that has a Met connection, we can do paper transfers. We would have to look at whether we could do it through Chino Basin Water Master if they don't have, but I think we can pull that off too.
no, the point I want to make is that this map shows a very limited area and doesn't show the bottom half of our divisions. And so I want to make sure that people understand that this is still a benefit to those customers down there to be able to bank this water, because like you're saying, we can do paper transfers or we can do whatever we need to do in order to move that water. So this is a benefit to all of our customers, not just what the map shows,
Retail
if that
and
makes
wholesale.
sense. Yes.
Yes.
And I think that's really important because we first put on our retail cap and say, can our retail customers take advantage of this? But the whole time that we've been planning this, it's both. Because we fully believe that we can share this benefit with all of our retail customers. Now, and this is why the operating agreement is complicated, because we'll buy water as Western. We can then sell water out of Western storage accounts to Rancho or to Corona, Temescal, any one of our customers, Rubidoux. But we also have wholesale customers like Elsinore that can put it in their own name. So that's why the operating agreement is complicated. We have to track all of that. But we're very careful to show the benefits. And the other option that's also there is other SARCUP member agencies could come to us and say, well, Western, you were very proactive and put $20 million worth of water in there. Any willingness to sell us some of that water within the program? Because we're all partners in the watershed, we would certainly bring that back to the board for consideration.
Right, no, and that's why I wanted to bring that up, because I want to make sure that people understand that it's a benefit to our entire district. It's not just to this specific map. And so this is a huge benefit to all of our agencies within our service territory to be able to benefit from this transaction and what we're proactively doing while we have a wet year and we can bank the water, that it's going to pay off somewhere down in the future, right? Because the cost of water, we know, is just going to continue to climb. It's just going to keep going up. So this is just smart coupon using while there's a fire sale, if you will, on water. And it's available, and they're looking for places to put it. And staff has already had that meeting with Met to figure out, right, what we've got going on and what's available. And this all is a piece of that. So I just wanted to point that benefit out. So thank you.
Okay. Faucia, did you have, Laura?
I just have a comment. And Craig, you've probably already thought of this, but as I'm listening to what we're doing here, in the presentations that I've been involved in for Solve the Water Crisis, we always talk about groundwater storage, above-ground storage. And especially when we're out talking to, say, a chamber or a service group, those aren't necessarily water folks. So they're kind of starting to get what that means. They know groundwater, it's in the ground, but they have no idea. And really, this map was so eye-opening to me when I saw it the first time. Because I know about Chino Basin Water Master, but I didn't realize how many opportunities there were for underground. So all I'm saying is I think that this can be pointed to as a perfect example of growing the groundwater storage as part of Solve the Water Crisis. I mean, it's obvious to us because we know what it's doing and what it can do in the future. But for just folks out there that aren't that familiar with water, and we're trying to get them on board to show the state how important it is that these types of things continue to occur, this is a beautiful illustration of that. So I hope I know you've said it has taken such a long time, but I'm kind of thinking this is the perfect time for it to actually come out and be public and be talked about and be utilized. So just a observation on my part.
Okay, any other comments from board members? I would just add that this has a potential regional benefit on top of benefit to all of Western service area. Craig mentioned that if we get this water in the ground and some other water provider is short for some reason, they could potentially come to us and say, would you sell us some of that water? And we could. So this is really a big deal. And I'm glad to see it. I wish we'd find a way to spend the full 50 and put it in the ground.
Well, we need a lot more facilities.
Yes.
So.
And the CFO is still breathing, okay.
He's only grimacing a little bit. So, okay, Tammy, we have a motion and a second. When you're ready, would you please call the roll?
Thank you. Director Torres?
Yes.
Director Dinstead?
Aye.
Director Roten?
Yes.
Director Rizvi?
Yes.
President Gardner?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries 5-0.
You. And. Yeah. Can we get Derek and Kevin back to discuss amending our fiscal year 22-23 operating budget?
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll turn, I don't know.
Me.
Garrett,
we arm wrestled about this
one. We need to make a little cleanup on a prior approval by the board.
I think the CFO should go first. So.
Okay.
Yeah. Because it has to do with accounting. Really, it's solely accounting. So at last month's March 15th board meeting, you'll recall that approval was given for a condition assessment of both the Mills Gravity Line and the March Pipeline. But after the meeting, staff realized the incorrect funding source was stated in the letter for the March Pipeline assessment. It was incorrectly stated that funding would come from the March East Operating Fund, which is a potable water system. The March Pipeline is a non-potable water line, and any condition assessment should be paid from the non-potable operating fund. So staff's confusion likely came from the name of the service area and the name of the pipeline, both having March in the name. So today's requested action is simply to rescind the March 15th approval to amend the budget of the incorrect funding source and instead amend the operating budget of the correct funding source. As stated in the budget impact section of today's board letter, there is sufficient reserves in the non-potable water fund to pay for this condition assessment. So it's purely an administrative action, and on behalf of staff, I apologize for this oversight.
So in April, we're going to correct the March error.
Exactly.
And what
Good to me.
what you see before you is the two of them arm wrestling to take ownership of the mistake. So
Thank you.
kudos to both of them.
Who's not here today? It's their fault.
The board took the action, though.
No, I do want to say, just on a go-forward basis, we actually do care very much about the staff letters that we put forth, and we want to make sure they're very accurate. And what we're doing internally is we're doing some additional training on the funding areas and what each funding area means, and, to make sure that everyone knows where it's going.
This goes back to Director Rizvi's question earlier today about the funding groups.
Yeah.
I'll move the item.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Still no public comment, Tammy?
Still no public comment.
Okay. No discussion? Would you please call the roll?
Thank you. Director Torres?
Yes.
Director Dinstedt?
Aye.
Director Roten?
Yes.
Director Rizvi?
Yes.
President Gardner?
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries 5-0.
Darn it, I should have waited to vote. I wanted to see the arm wrestle first. Okay.
Thank you, directors.
Thank you. And good catch, by the way.
Yeah.
Brings us to reports. Mr. General Counsel.
Yes, I wanted to update the board on some developments with regard to SB 1439. That's the bill that was passed last year, applying some disclosure and disqualification rules to elected officials. The FPPC is in the process of making some administrative regulations, and this Friday there will be a meeting by the FPPC where they will consider some of those regulations to further define the new statute and possibly adopt them in either May or later. So that is forthcoming. In addition, at the end of May, there is a hearing in Sacramento Superior Court on the lawsuit that challenges the new law. And so that should give us some guidance in terms of at least where the trial court might be going with that. It's a motion for judgment on the pleadings, which basically means the court will be considering really the constitutionality of the law. So once we hear from the court, I will report back to you, but I wanted to give you that update because it may impact some of you.
Great. Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Bellinger?
How would it impact us?
Well, it impacts you if you are collecting campaign contributions, anything over $250 or more. That contributor, if they have an action pending before this district, then you need to disclose and disqualify. It also impacts you if you're soliciting donations from individuals who have matters pending before the district. It prohibits you from making those solicitations. So certainly folks who have an active campaign should be aware of the law. So I'm happy to answer any specific questions offline.
No, sorry, I thought you meant what would impact us was the lawsuit, so.
Well, if the.
Later, it would impact us.
Yeah, if the
Okay.
court invalidates the new law as it applies to elected officials, and that is ever upheld in the Court of Appeal or the California Supreme Court, then, that could remove this, the newly adopted law.
No, but we have our own measures in place, so it's.
We do, although, as I mentioned, I think one of the recent board meetings, if the basis of the invalidation is the Constitution, then that could impact our ordinance as well.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. General Manager.
I have a few. I will start off with an introduction. You may notice Steve has a partner helping him push the buttons down there. So Justin Crivello just started this week.
Welcome.
Today. Today, you'll recall Spencer left us, and so we're really happy to have Justin on board, and you will see him sitting in that seat as soon as he learns which buttons to push. So welcome aboard, Justin. And he will be helping out the board with all of your IT issues, so you might want to write down Justin's name. He will be very helpful for you.
Glad to have you.
We are really happy to have him. Marietta, we talked a lot about Marietta. The pipeline cleaning is going on actually today in certain areas, so maybe this is an update for Director Dinstedt more than anyone else. Actually, we're out there 9 a.m. to 3 a.m. today doing flushing, so we always like to give a heads up to the customers in that area.
Clarification, we're just doing camera work today.
Oh, camera work. So, so it could stir up things and we could still have complaints, so want to stay on top of that. We did a lot of outreach on our well 7 drilling, and that's completed. So it started, went fast, went well, so that's great shape. I don't know, Sarah, did we, the well drilling went really well. I think we received 0 comments or complaints. So that was good news.
And we had our high flow
No,
water
well,
event,
that's
or
still
not
coming.
yet?
Sorry. Ding, 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 ding.
Just a note, we actually got to the target depth. There's still a lot of work that we're gonna be doing out there, so there'll still be work, noise, all that kind of thing. But we did get down, that's a big milestone for us to get down to that depth. And now we're doing a bunch of testing to see, well, what do we have, how much water comes out?
And the development of the well is still coming.
Yep, absolutely.
And that's where the flows in the street will come from.
Okay. That's honestly where I expect to get any comments that we do get is, why is all that water in the gutter? So, okay, thank you.
Yep, yeah, well, drilling wells is a noisy activity.
Yes.
And it's good to get that past us. Reminder, the air show at MARB is this weekend. So I think we have tickets on Sunday.
I have tickets on Sunday and
For
some
the board?
VIP passes for Friday night.
Okay? So contact
Friday or
Tammy
Saturday.
if you'd like to
I'll-
partake in
I'll
that.
see you after the meeting.
I'm planning on being there Saturday. Other staff will be here be there on Sunday. But it's a free event, so anyone can go. You don't need a pass. We just have passes for VIP seating for you.
And parking.
Yes. Aqua Spring Conference, week of Monday, May 8th is the start. So I know you're all aware of that, but keep us in the loop. If I think we're counting on everyone attending. If you can't attend, let us know. We're planning a few activities. You'll hear more about that. Reminder, our Waterworks Wonders celebration is still scheduled for May 20th, 11 to 2, right out here. Go ahead and do all the marketing you want to get the community to come. It's a free event. There'll be food. Well, operators to talk to. They all have their displays, so that'll be great. We're really looking forward to that. Reminder, I am on vacation starting next Monday for 2 weeks. I'll be back I'll be back in time to go to Aqua. So I'll actually be 3 weeks out of the office. So contact him, contact Tammy if anything comes up for you. With that concludes my comments, but we've got Albert here, and Albert is going to give us an update on the backflow cross-connection fire service upgrades. Albert?
Good morning.
Good morning.
So I'm here to give an update on this topic of backflow, cross-connection, private fire line upgrades. Next slide, please. I previously presented on this topic to the committee back in 2021. And the task at hand here is there's devices out there that Western has that are not testable, that are in confined spaces, they belong to the customer, and they need to be upgraded. And so we've been working hard on this topic, and we've been reaching out to our neighboring agencies to see what they've done with the topic. Next slide, please. And so we said, well, let's get together and see what else has been done out there. We've never had a meet and greet, if you will, of all the agencies out there. And based on this topic, we were able to accomplish that. First of all, we developed an internal fire service ad hoc because internally, this is going to touch a lot of hands. Strategic communications, grant funding, operations, of course, our cross-section control team is boots in the ground out there. We had to gather a ton of information out there, go out there, do hazard assessments for all these sites, and see what's most at risk for us, right? Because these devices are not testable, meaning how do we know that they work? How do we know that they're protecting our distribution system if we can't even test them? Next slide, please. So what we did is we hosted a meet and greet, and I want to thank Paul and Tony for allowing us to do that. And the attendees were Eastern, Rancho Municipal, Elsinore Valley, cities of Riverside, Hemet, San Jacinto, and even Metropolitan. And so we got to, as you can see in the photo here, it was a good roundtable discussion and see what other agencies have done and get ideas. We didn't want to recreate the wheel, but at the same time, it was good to see a lot of faces in this industry that we hadn't seen each other for 10 plus years. We had heard about each other, but never met in one room. And so, next slide, please. A few takeaways from this meet and greet. For example, cities of Hemet and San Jacinto, they allow their customer 2 years to bring their devices to current standards. We discovered Elsinore. They own their devices. They internally got funding, upgraded them themselves. It isn't much to maintain them, but it is a big upfront cost for these devices, upwards of $30,000 per device. And again, the customer owns this. So what we're doing with forming the ad hoc is what direction we're gonna come back to you and say, hey, we're gonna go in this direction. There's gonna be a lot of outreach needed for that. And, so there's a lot of works, a lot in the works. And it was so successful that Eastern wants us to host, or wants them to host, or wants to host it, the next one in the summer. And so it was a great showing of us being a regional leader in the topic and bringing all these other agencies together so that we can collaborate and get on the same page on this topic. So next slide. The next steps, we've had some improvements already. Riverside Unified School District has started retrofitting their devices. They've done King High School down the street. We've gone out there, we've looked for grants. There's some headway there. Not sure where that's gonna go. We're still working on the details on that, but there's some forward progress, and that's great for us to see on this topic. Next slide, please. That's about it.
I'll add, we've talked to Congressman Takano, and he's actually put an earmark in for this program for us. So we'll see if that pans out. So we have a funding, hopefully, fingers crossed, we have a funding source, for a partial funding source, not for the whole program. So we're excited about that.
Great. Thank you.
I have a question. Backflow, what are these? Are they on fire hydrants? Are they on
No, they're right
residences?
outside. Typically, you'll see them outside of big complexes. They're big, red.
Oh, okay.
Unfortunately,
I have seen them.
the first slide, I covered it with the update sign. But it's basically if you drive up and down the street, you'll see the devices. They're in cages now.
They're pretty big.
Steve, can we go to slide one?
Okay, all right. I have seen those before.
Yeah, there you
There
go.
it is.
Apologize.
That's a firewall.
And a lot of times I see them, they're leaking.
That's not a good
So that's
thing.
probably kind of what you're talking
So
about.
our challenge here, Albert's touching on it. We're very engaged in it, so we're not maybe explaining it fully. But back in the days, there was a different backflow prevention device that was installed by customers. Customers install these. It's part of their development of their own, compliance to get water service.
Individual customers?
Yes. And then, well, not residential customers, but commercial
business,
customers.
okay.
Schools, churches, and they're required to maintain them and test them to ensure that they're working to protect our water system. What Albert was touching on is some of the other entities have taken that away from the customers and brought it into their own activities. So they fund them, install them, and check them. We've never done that. And the vast majority of water agencies across the state, it is part of the customer's side of the meter, and they maintain that. But what was installed years ago does not meet current standards. So now what do you do? Because our customers would say, well, we followed the rules have changed, whose responsibility is it to follow the rules? It's theirs. So we're looking for money to really help out our customers.
Okay.
Because this is a big financial, as Albert said, sometimes these are
can
$20,000,
imagine.
$30,000,
Yeah.
depending on the size. Going back to a customer and say, hey, you have to invest another $30,000 is not a good phone call. So we're trying to help our customers out.
And so, for example, the photo that you see there, that's a backflow that's to standard. The old ones that are out there that we're talking about are buried 4 to 5 feet in a vault with big steel heavy lids and you can't access them. You can't test them. This is an approved testable device. This is what we want to see out there. The other ones that we're talking about are in vaults. You don't know that they're there, but they're there. And so we need to bring those above ground.
Okay, so the ones that have seen that I think are this or something like this, those are newer?
Yes, those are all above ground
Those are the ones I've
compliant.
seen leaking?
You need to call the owner of that property and
Yes.
tell them their thing's
Okay.
leaking.
Oh,
We
okay.
would actually tell them also when we go out on our rounds.
Okay.
Trust me, the water team is very cognizant of water on the ground anywhere at any time.
Yeah, I'm not sure that it was in the western service area that I saw it.
I'm sure it
but
wasn't.
Probably not. So, thank you for that explanation.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, Albert.
Thank you.
Thank you, Albert.
Okay,
Sorry, that concludes my report.
great. Brings us to director's reports and requests. First one is SAWPA. SAWPA met yesterday and authorized $74,600 from the SAWPA Building Fund for design, bidding support, and construction administration for the SAWPA building lobby security and ADA upgrades, which Director Denstedt is going to be directing the decorating of. So, and thank you for that. And that was it for SAWPA. MWD.
Thank you. So you have a set of summary report in front of you. A lot of money is being spent right now. That's all part of the budget
I don't
for
either.
a lot of construction and a lot of different projects that have been approved via the budget. The water allocation, that's the big news, the big increase, right, from the,
75%.
right, to 75%.
35 to 70.
But there's rumors, everybody is talking about the rumors, that it may actually go to 100%. So
Ryan,
just,
if it goes to 100, Ryan.
okay, so I'm just
So we hope
saying
it does go to 100.
that's the big talk right now up there, is everybody's got their betting pools on, and it's the big game. So they're thinking that it's going to be 100% because the state's looking to push water and move it. So there's a lot of water flowing out of Orville right now. And then obviously, the one big disappointment, and I continue to not be able to participate in, is the Rubidoux Community Services District for, that was kicked down the road again and moved to another committee and discussions. Craig went and had a very robust conversation with that committee for the DE&I.
Equity, affordability.
Inclusion and affordability, yes. They keep changing the
It's
names,
hard to
yes.
keep track.
So there was a workshop basically that was done, and several of the, Craig was invited to speak, the manager from, general manager
Rojas-
from
Alex Rojas from Central Basin.
Central Basin, and then
Sandy Curl from.
San Diego. So there was some robust conversation that took place, so hopefully there were some myths and some things that were dispelled at that, so I appreciate you driving up to Met and having that conversation and educating the folks on what needs to happen. And then the other big thing that was a big deal for Rancho California Water District was the credit of the $200,000 for the shutdowns and what they ended up getting. So that was approved. So all good things, all good things. And hopefully at this next month, we'll be able to finally put Rubidoux to rest.
Successfully.
Successfully, yes.
So hopefully in May.
Hopefully.
Rumor has it's going on the committee calendar next month.
Yes.
And to the board next month.
Yes. Have not seen that yet, so.
Yeah,
but
we
that-
always see it kind of, the week before it goes, so I think it's gonna go, Adele told me it would go next month.
Yes. And there's still discussion going on and taking place with all of the bills and what's going to be done. I know there was a big discussion over 1572 with the non-functional turf and some amendments that needed to be done. The vote was passed that Metropolitan would co-sponsor that if the amendments were done and met. So we're looking to hear the final on that, because I guess a 10-page document was sent to us by the writer of that legislation 20 minutes before the meeting, and I did not go through those 10 pages because, yeah, they told us that it came as we were in the meeting. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Chino Basin Water Master meets next week. Chino to Salter Authority.
So I attended my first in-person meeting there. It was cozy around the conference table, but it all worked out fine, and we had a few little delays with getting the Zoom portion up, but got all the kinks worked out, and basically the highlights, and this was brought up in our finance committee earlier this week, that there's usually a refund, well, I shouldn't say usually. Certain years, there's a refund from CDA to the member agencies, and then the member agencies can decide if they want to receive that money back or they want to apply it to next year's purchases. So the board approved taking $2 million of the surplus to sort of put in savings for future identified projects. And so the surplus, total surplus going back is like $413,000. And I was able to clarify at the Finance Committee that we do receive our portion in the form of a check. And so that was interesting. The whole thing was interesting because, of course, it's all new to me. We also voted on a job classification and compensation changes for 2 separate positions. And it was interesting, the last change hadn't happened since 2015. So it'd been quite a while since they reviewed that and made those adaptations. There were a couple of construction contracts awarded, and we ended up putting off, we were supposed to do the general manager review, but we moved that out to the next meeting for the sake of time. And I think that was about it as far as, they finished up there were some emergency repairs that had to be done from an episode that happened on New Year's Eve. And that's all been completed, and the report to close it out was given as an information item. So our next, it doesn't have our next meeting on here. Our next meeting, I think, is 1 month from when we met, basically, end of May. So that's it.
Great, thank you.
And one more thing. Is Derek still in here? I wanted to thank Derek very much for the kind of Cliff Notes, I'm going to call it a cheat sheet for me, not for you, of the different action items, and that it gives me confidence knowing that our staff has reviewed these and then gives a recommendation for how I could vote on that particular item, or I could ask questions ahead of time or whatever. So I really appreciate having that, especially because it's all new information for me, so thank you. Now I'm done.
Okay, Prikra.
Next month.
WRCOG.
Thank you. Just something that was discussed at committee on Monday for finance was just the fact that WRCOG is potentially looking at a restructuring of how they do their membership fees. So I want to make sure we have a seat at the table before we're on the table and we end up paying more money, since we're paying a fair share, more than our fair share now. So just wanted to keep everybody up to speed on that. Otherwise, we have our next meeting at the beginning of May. It should be on May Day, actually, May 1st. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah.
We were supposed to meet last week, but the budget they needed some changes in the budget, so we postponed it till May.
Okay. Aqua Region 9.
Aqua, we are continuing to have discussions and meetings at the board meetings. So that happened last week to talk about future programs and things that we're going to be doing for the membership. So more to come on all of that. And then obviously conference is coming up in May. So I look forward to seeing everybody at conference, and we'll have a Region 9 meeting. So check your schedules, because we will be there to talk about and have all of the reports on all the committees that we represent and have representation on, to be able to give those reports. So you are certainly welcome to attend any of those.
Thank you. Brings us to General Director's comments. We'll start with Director Denstedt.
No, I am, well, I did attend the Marietta Fireman's Barbecue on Saturday, and it was a huge success. It was a huge turnout. And for all of the years that I've been volunteering at that barbecue and serving on the line with our firefighters and our city council representatives, it was the first time. That event is scheduled from noon until 6. They ran out of food, and barbecue was sold out at 2:45. First time ever. So it's been sold out, but never that early. And people were actually turned away, so very successful event. And the city is also hosting a Earth Night, or Earth Day, this weekend on Saturday. And I understand we have a booth or somebody in attendance.
Yes, I can confirm that Western Water will be present alongside our other 3 partner water agencies that serve Marietta, celebrating Earth Day.
Great. Thank you. And that's all I have.
Okay. Director Rizvi.
I'm good, thank you.
Director Torres?
Just a few. Attended the step gala, which was very eye-opening to me. I didn't realize, I think this was my first time attending, and so it was great to see our involvement in these types of STEM programs. Also attended the Clean Energy Infrastructure Seminar with the mayor and the California State Treasurer. Very enlightening. And I was going to encourage everybody to get involved in Earth Day activity this week. I will be at my baby's school, planning a community garden. And then just wanted to extend an invitation to the United Way Gala. That'll be on May 6th. We have worked with the United Way before to help with income qualifying programs. And so that's it. That's all I have. Have a wonderful rest of your week, everyone.
Thank you. Director Roden.
Just actually a question. I know the In-N-Out truck is going to be at our event on the 20th. I'm assuming that's where you purchase your food, right? It's free? It's free food.
We will have a complimentary in and out up to a certain amount, so while supplies last. So we do encourage our community to come on out, join us. I think we're gonna have a couple other treats as well available. But we're excited to offer that this year as one way to engage with our community, and we'll have a ton of other interactive activities as well. Great for kids, whole family type event.
Okay.
Given the popularity of In-N-Out, our marketing process should be come to our event and there'll be food provided, rather than marketing free In-N-Out for everybody.
Well, okay, so I haven't
may
said
not
it was
work well.
free. I was like, and the In-N-Out truck's gonna be there, and then I'm thinking to myself, what does that mean? So,
Get 100 million
I
people
haven't
here
told
just
too,
wanting
I haven't
food.
told too many people.
I can't invite people to come and get a 4x4?
No,
As long as they stay for our event.
I did attend the Citrus, it was at the Citrus State Park on Saturday. It was like a citrus tasting event, and they had craft vendors, and of course, the park is just beautiful. So I saw the Master Gardener booth, and I noticed they had up these big displays with enlarged copies of the landscape guide. So I wandered over there and I told my husband, this is our landscape guide. Well, I'm losing my word here, but I was promptly approached by, I think it was the gentleman that did the Tomato Mania a workshop that we just had a couple weekends ago. And he says to me, I thought you were going to have a booth here. And I was like, okay, I'm sorry, I don't know. And he goes, well, we didn't bring any landscape guides because we thought you guys were bringing them. So it was fine, but it was just kind of funny. So then I looked, and actually Metropolitan had a table there. So I thought, well, that's probably why we aren't there, because they were there. And, anyway, it was just kind of funny because those master gardeners are very intense people when it comes to their passion for gardening, and they have so much knowledge. It's just amazing. We've planted, we, being my husband, has planted our garden this year, and we haven't done it for a while. And he's been on the YouTube videos and all this stuff, but boy, they just take it to the next level because it's so intense with, this fertilizer and the temperature can only be this. And I'm like, yeah, we're going to put ours in the ground and we're going to hope we get vegetables. So it was funny. But anyway, it was an enjoyable event once we found it, because we parked by the visitors section, which is where they told you to park. Well, the event was clear on the other side of the park in like the grass area. So we had a nice little walk and ran into some folks we knew. So that was it. Other than I would just like to ask if we could adjourn in honor of Vicki Roop, who was a director on the Santa Ana River Water Company Board, a longtime director, longtime resident of what we fondly refer to as Old Miraloma area. Santa Ana River Water Company is an interesting agency, I think. It's a mutual company, so the folks that live there have shares in it, and they actually own the water company. And I'm happy to say that in the last year or so, they are starting to participate more. Like, we have a Hoop Valley Interagency Council. They're coming to that. I'm seeing them at Watermaster. They've been coming to that, and I think they've been coming to your manager meeting when they can, but
Okay, when they can.
okay, yes.
They get the invite.
So, yeah, really, it's a huge change for them because they pretty much
Until recently, they had never.
weren't involved, yeah,
So
yeah.
it's good they're showing up occasionally.
Yeah, so.
We'll take that.
Vicky's passing, from what I understand, was pretty sudden, and she also served on CDA board. So she will be missed, and I did have the pleasure one time of meeting with her when I first came on Western. Chris Birch and I, Chris from Hooper Community Services District, and I got to meet with she and their general manager, John, just to kind of introduce ourselves in Western. And, Chris was a great tie-in there because they work with JCSD on certain things. So I'm so sorry she has passed, and wanted to see if we could recognize that. So she passed on March 21st. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. I also attended the annual STEP dinner. It's always a good event, but it's growing because of COVID. They did not meet in person as they had when they originally started, and they started doing a whole bunch of online stuff. They have retained the online stuff in addition to starting the in-person back up, so they're reaching far more students than they were previously or originally. Gordon Borns is kind of the father of this program, and was there and spoke, as did a number of others. And they had two young people who were award winners, both really impressive young folks. It's always fun to get to see our young up-and-coming people who will be sitting in these chairs or the White House or somewhere in the future. They are really sharp young folks. And that's all I had. Do we have any requests for future agenda items? Hearing none. We do have some information items in the packet, if anybody has any questions about them. Ask the staff because they know. Our next meeting is Wednesday, May the 17th, and we will adjourn in memory and honor of Vicki Root. No, we'll be at Aqua.
That's not the Aqua Week.
All right,
No.
all right.
Very confused,
All right.
but
Can we
it's
just
not
say
the
it's the
Aqua Week.
17th? Go ahead. Do you want to?
Yes, so directors, originally, every year in the past, we have had to cancel the first meeting in May due to the Aqua Conference. So staff, in its infinite wisdom, decided that we would be proactive and not schedule that meeting so we wouldn't have to go through the cancellation process, and Aqua changed the date.
And some of us planned our vacation around there not being a first meeting in May
There you
also.
go.
So we apologize. We will try not to be so proactive next time.
And that had to do with the contract with Aqua. So the facilities weren't available the first week for whatever reason, because generally Aqua books 2 years in advance. But for whatever reason, that week wasn't available, so they had to bump it to the second weeks, because traditionally it is the first week of May. So just
no
kind
worries.
of an entertaining little faux pas.
We can call a special meeting if we really get desperate and
No,
miss
I've
each
made
other too
plans
much.
now.
The general manager will be on vacation, and I think that would not be fair.
We'll only call it in an emergency. So with that, we will be adjourned. Thank you all.